If Iran and Israel were to go to war, who would actually win? So far, both Iran and Israel have limited their responses, sticking to small, pre-announced strikes with specific targets. But what if this limited approach were to escalate into a full-scale war? What would this look like and who would win? Firstly, in any given war scenario or conflict, understanding what winning looks like really depends upon what the stated goals are. It's not just simply about conquering land or killing more of your enemy that makes one group prevail over the other. For instance, America killed far more Viet Congs than they suffered during Vietnam War, yet America lost that war. Similarly, America invaded and occupied Afghanistan for almost 20 years, yet ultimately lost the war, with the Taliban reasserting their power over the country. So understanding what victory actually looks like for each party is crucial to understanding who would win in an all-out war. And this doesn't necessarily depend upon knowing who has the most advanced army or who has the bigger numbers of tanks and soldiers. No, that's not what it necessarily depends upon. It depends upon whether they have the ability to achieve the stated objectives that they are fighting for. In that case, if Israel and Iran were to engage in an all-out war, what would their goals be? For Israel, it's clear. They'd see their goal as the end of the current Shia-led theocratic system, effectively remove the Ayatollahs and Shia clerics from power and end what they call their Wilayat al-Faqih system in Iran, in order to end Iran as a threat against themselves within the region. Anything less than this wouldn't be seen as a victory for them, even if they substantially weakened Iran. For Iran, their agenda has always been about preserving their clerical theocratic system they established through Khomeini's revolution in 1979. Therefore, victory for them isn't about ending Israel, but rather about maintaining their theocratic sectarian Shia nationalistic system in place. So now we're clear about the goals of both sides in an all-out war. For Israel, it's about ending this particular theocratic Iranian system that they have. And for Iran, it's about preserving that system, keeping the clerics in power. We can now, after understanding this, look at power and arsenal both sides have in order to achieve their respective aims. Firstly, in terms of landmass, Israel is tiny. It's dwarfed by Iran. Israel is approximately 70 times smaller than Iran. Iran has a landmass of around 636,000 square miles. Compare that to Israel's paltry 8,522 square miles. As you can see, if Israel was superimposed on Iran, it would be completely dwarfed by Iran. Iran's population is around 92 million, whereas Israel is approximately 9.4 million, 2 million of whom are actually Arabs who remained post-1948 establishment of Israel. Clearly, the numerical and landmass advantage is on the side of Iran. And what about soldiers? Israel has around 170,000 active soldiers, 465,000 reservists and 35,000 militias, totaling around 670,000 military personnel. But compare this with Iran, which has 610,000 active personnel, 350,000 reservists and 220,000 paramilitary troops, a combined number that's almost double the size of Israel, with just under 1.2 million fighters in total. Both Israel and Iran militarized their population with mandatory military service, but whereas Israel mandates it both for men and women, Iran only mandates this for men. However, due to the vastly larger population, Iran would be able to call upon far greater numbers from its 40 million male population. So in terms of military personnel or potential military personnel, then Iran has far greater numbers. And this is also reflected in other numbers too. Iran has more than 1,996 tanks compared to 1,370 tanks in Israel. Iran has over 65,000 armoured vehicles compared to Israel's 43,000, and they have more artillery and more mobile rocket projectors too. In terms of naval power, Iran again seems to have the greater fleet strength, 101 versus 67. However, a land or even a naval war between these two countries is not where this is going to be fought. Iran and Israel are separated by a number of countries. Just look at the map. You have Jordan, Syria, Iraq that stand between these two countries. Israel simply wouldn't be able to move its military personnel across Arab states. Yes, we know how much treachery the Arab rulers have perpetrated in their support for Zionism, but columns of tanks and Israeli artillery rolling across Muslim lands towards Iran would just simply be unthinkable. These Arab regimes would collapse and the Arab population would end up probably trying to attack and kill Israeli ground forces moving across their lands. But similarly, Iranian troop movement is also very unlikely. It's unlikely that Iran is going to try to move its ground troops up to the border of Israel, because Israel's advanced air force would result in Iranian troop movement most likely being picked off by air-to-surface missiles or other missiles fired by Israel. So this would be a war like no other. Fighting would have to take place at a distance. And in this sense, this favours the army with a superior air force. That clearly goes to Israel in terms of fighter aircraft. Israel has 241 to Iran's 186. But what really underlines Israel's air superiority is the quality of its aircraft compared to Iran's. Iran since 1979 have not been able to develop their own air force and are largely reliant upon old, almost obsolete fighter aircrafts. Iran has a squadron of F-4s or F-5s from the 60s and 70s, whereas Israel have the state-of-the-art fighter jets, F-15s, F-16s and the very latest F-35 stealth aircrafts. So Iran could not challenge Israel using their aircrafts. Israel has far superior fighter jets. But Iran knows this, and so they've developed military drones like the Shahed Sagez drone, which is reverse engineered from the American RQ-170. They also have a host of ballistic and hypersonic missile technology too. So although Israel has dozens of fighter jets, Iran has thousands of kamikaze drones, and unlike Israel's aircraft that need mid-flight refueling, these drones don't have the same problem. Some of these drones have been sold and used by Russia in Ukraine. Both the Houthis in Yemen and Hezbollah in Lebanon have demonstrated that these drones can evade Israeli radar and the Israeli Iron Dome system. As I've mentioned, Iran also produces its own hypersonic missiles with sufficient range and speed to target Israel in a matter of minutes. Iran also has thousands of ballistic missiles, with America providing a lower estimate of around 3,000 of these ballistic missiles. These are rocket-propelled missiles that then fall to the ground, yet can be maneuvered even as they approach their target. So both Israel and Iran have sufficient weaponry, whether that's missiles, drones or aircraft, to target each other. The next question then becomes, well, what about the air defense? Could either country survive a sustained air attack? In April 2024, Iran launched hundreds of drones. These took hours to reach their target. All the while, Iran had actually pre-warned Israel and America of their attacks. And most of these drones were shot down by fighter jets or Israel's missile defense system. But what April's attack showed the world is that the Iron Dome, David Sling or the Patriot missile defense system can be overwhelmed. Simply put, Israel can easily run out of missiles to shoot down those approaching drones of ballistic or even hypersonic missiles that are sent to them by Iran. And certainly October the 1st attack, where Iran decided to use their ballistic and even some claimed even hypersonic missiles, that many of these were traveling too fast for Israel's missile defense systems to shoot down. Now, we don't know the exact damage October 1st attack caused, but there seems to be sufficient evidence from mobile phone footage and CCTV that showed many of these missiles hitting their targets, or at the very least hitting Israel. As for Iran's aerial defense capabilities, according to American intelligence sources, Iran only has 4 S-300 Russian-made air defense systems, all of which apparently are now been put out of action. This leaves both Iran and Israel, both of them, vulnerable to aerial assault. But then the next question is whether the two countries could withstand a barrage of missiles. What damage would this do to each country? Here, landmass and geography becomes more critical. As I said, Iran dwarfs Israel's landmass. That means while a large barrage from Israel could cause significant damage, the amount this would affect the Iranian population, i.e. the wider population, would be much less. That's because Iran's military installations are further away from civilian centers than Israel's military installation. For instance, on October 1st, Iran targeted Israeli military targets, yet this resulted in everyone in Israel having to secure themselves in bunkers, whereas there was little awareness from the wider population in Iran when Israel undertook its actions in both April and later on in October 2024. Furthermore, Iranian rocky and mountainous regions, which are quite extensive, are, according to some analysts, the places where they house their ballistic and hypersonic missiles. That means it makes it harder to accurately and effectively target Iranian capabilities or missile capabilities against Israel. Furthermore, they have extensive extensive tunnels and underground roads that allow for the transportation of missiles, while also having missiles launched from several hundred feet below ground. However, Iranian refineries are particularly vulnerable, as well as Iran's nuclear programs, where they have uranium enrichment sites and research. Israel would want to target these civilian infrastructures to cripple Iranian economy, as well as possibly cause significant damage from potential nuclear fallout. Israel, on the other hand, has critical infrastructure which are closer to civilian areas. Significant strikes by Iran lasting days, weeks, or even months would affect the entire population of Israel, disrupt its economy, and affect the people that haven't suffered from economic sanctions like Iran, or previous war like the one between Iraq and Iran that lasted for 8 years. Iranians are simply more battle-hardened population and more resilient compared to the Israeli population. Israel also has 9 power plants, 2 of which are coal-powered and 7 are gas-powered. Furthermore, Israel obtains 85% of its drinkable water from desalination plants, the vast majority of which is obtained by 5 particular desalination plants. So significant strikes by Iran against the 9 power plants and 5 desalination plants could have a devastating effect on the Israeli population. And there's one other strategic advantage that Iran has. While Israel wouldn't be able to engage in a ground offensive against Iran, Iran, however, does have Hezbollah on the very border of Israel. According to the late Hassan Nasrallah, Hezbollah has over 100,000 fighters. However, a more conservative estimate, which has been given by the Council for Foreign Relations, puts it around 40 to 50,000 fighters. Hezbollah is considered the world's most powerful militia that not only has tens of thousands of fighters, but also tanks, armored vehicles, and of course, tens of thousands of missiles. Currently, Israel are struggling against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. All the while, Hezbollah hasn't yet unleashed its full arsenal of missiles. However, there's 2 further things to state about Israel's strategic advantages. Firstly, that Israel has the unstinting support of America, and this is primarily what they're counting upon, that America will be willing to fight and die for Israel. And that is really a video in and of itself, what would happen if America engaged with Iran in an all-out war. Safe to say though, America would not want to be dragged into a costly war with Iran, particularly after the disasters of invading Iraq and Afghanistan that ultimately led to their defeat. The second advantage is Israel's nuclear capabilities, certainly a game changer. Israel's strike just on Tehran alone would likely leave 500,000 Iranians killed. As we have consistently seen, Israel is more than willing to justify war crimes and crimes against humanity, all in the name of self-defense. However, this would be a Rubicon that the world, including I think America and the West, would not want to see cross the use of nuclear weapons. However, when it comes to Israel, and after witnessing the genocide being perpetrated in Gaza, then nothing is off the table for this barbaric state. This is probably the biggest reason that an effective nuclear deterrence is desperately needed for the Muslim world, as this would be the only or most likely defense against any preemptive nuclear strike by Israel on Iran or any other Muslim country. But assessing this purely from a conventional warfare point of view, it seems that if the objectives for Israel would be the destruction of the Iranian political order, then this seems highly improbable for Israel to achieve this merely through aerial bombardment. In the history of conflicts, aerial bombardments do not lead to regime change or collapse. It requires ground fighting. So even with the support of America, without committing ground forces, the collapse of the Iranian regime seems highly improbable. This would leave Israel unable to achieve its main military objective in an all-out war with Iran. Furthermore, by engaging in open warfare against Iran, it would most likely result in Israel suffering from greater problems and even a real existential crisis and threat to its own existence. Remember, over a quarter of the population of dual nationality, most of them would probably likely leave to their home countries outside of Israel. A further 20% are Palestinian, unlikely to support Israel. Thirdly, with Hezbollah in the north, Hamas still in operation in Gaza, and the potential for a full uprising in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, this would leave Israel facing multiple fronts. And with Israel's strategic infrastructure vulnerable to attack, the 9 power stations, and 5 desalination plants, it could leave the vast majority of the population without drinkable water and power. A conventional war between the two, in my opinion, favors Iran. While Israel would be hoping American military might would come into play and support their objectives, the fact is Israel would not be able to achieve this war objectives of bringing down the Iranian regime on its own, even with American support, unless they commit ground troops, while at the same time Israel open itself up to a potential devastating existential crisis for its very existence, the very existence of Israel itself.